untold tale of Hurricane Floyd. Lost at sea at the center of the storm, 8 men facing nature's fury. Now, for the first time, the full story of their dramatic rescue. Plus, this is Dateline Tuesday, September 28, 1999. Tonight, they were 8 men alone in 50-foot seas, facing a monster named Floyd.
Wave would come over the top, and then it'd smash down on you like 20-pound sledgehammer.
8 men forced to leave their dying ship.
You gotta do what you gotta do to get off of that vessel.
Lost in a furious storm. They thought hope was lost too. Until, from the skies...
Never saw a helicopter. Saw a couple angels coming.
For the first time, the full story of a daring rescue inside a deadly swirl of sea and sky. Keith Morrison with a Dateline survivor story. From Studio 3B in Rockefeller Center, here is Jane Pauley.
Good evening. Unless you're one of the thousands still waiting for the water to recede or trying to dig your life out of the muck that Floyd left behind, the worst hurricane of the season so far is just a memory. But for a handful of men, Floyd is the monster that tried to kill them. And but for a heroic rescue, certainly would have. Tonight, for the first time, the full story of the 8-man crew of a sinking tugboat who fell into Floyd's clutches, and the men whose mission it was to get them back. Here's Keith Morrison with a Dateline survivor story.
There is a special respect, some would call it dread, among men who ply the sea, respect for the weather.
Everybody understands that a mariner lost at sea is a 50-50 chance at best.
And no sailor should have to face a storm like Floyd. At its height, the size of Texas, packing winds of 155 miles an hour, creating 60-foot waves.
Just go to like a 5-story or 6-story building, get down on your knees and look up, and that's what you see, and just imagine it's water.
This story of survival begins early in the morning of September 15th. An ocean-going tugboat called the Gulf Majesty, lashed to a barge more than 300 miles off the coast of Florida, is feeling the full fury of Hurricane Floyd. Experts predict that Floyd will head northwest, so the Gulf Majesty tries to sail out of harm's way. But Floyd changes course, and the tugboat and the 8 men aboard are caught dead center. Her captain is John Dalton, a former Marine. At 30, the youngest man aboard.
7:30, it was obvious that we were going to abandon ship. The boat was rocking, and it was apparent that the boat was going to be sinking, and sinking fast.
In the howling gale, on their dying ship, they radio the Coast Guard for help. All of the crew put on life vests. This was one of them. David Lytle grabs this emergency radio beacon and straps it to his chest.
You gotta do what you gotta do to get off of that vessel and in the water, because the vessel's gonna take you down with it if you stay on it.
In 65-mile-an-hour winds, they fling a life raft like a 10-foot inner tube into the raging Atlantic. Then engineer Mark Davis watches helplessly.
As soon as we launched it, the wind flipped it over upside down.
Without a moment's hesitation, 5 crewmen jump into that angry sea and right the life raft and crawl inside. Following evacuation procedures, 3 have stayed on board ship with the emergency beacon. Then, as they're about to board the craft, disaster. In Floyd's fierce winds, a 1/4-inch nylon rope like this, holding the raft to the ship, snaps. 5 men and their raft disappear into the storm.
The wind took them so strong, it was unbelievable.
Now there are 3, and they know there is no choice. They must stay together, and they jump from the ship to the sea.
First thing we said to each other was, dying's not an option.
In the raft is a heartsick young captain and just 4 of his 7 crew.
That was the most sickening feeling that I had, is when the crew got separated, because there was absolutely nothing we could do for them.
As Floyd takes aim at the United States coast, it tosses an 83,000-ton ship with its might.
Some of the crew, they're a little green around the gills.
Almost 200 miles to the east of the sinking tugboat, Navy Captain Mike Miller is commanding the aircraft carrier John F. Kennedy, riding out the storm. Waves are splashing the flight deck almost 6 stories high, and they've run out of seasickness pills.
The bow was moving up and down about 30 feet.
Yeah, what's up?
At 8:30 a.m., Miller gets a call from the Coast Guard. His is the only ship remotely close to the sinking tug. He considers the risk to his 2,500 men, and he thinks about the 8 sailors lost at sea.
I announced to the crew that, well, there were people in need, and it was our job to try and save them.
Within minutes, the enormous carrier turns around and sails full bore for the center of that awful storm. And as it closes to within 130 miles or so of the beacon signal, this Navy Seahawk helicopter is launched. And then a second takes off. Back at the abandoned tug, the crew is scattered, and the men in the water are watching their ship go down.
The boat had come down in the stern, and then eventually it was straight up like this.
Straight up and down.
And it went down like this, and as it was going down, the engines were still running, the lights were still on.
Just about the same exact time, it was like somebody tapped me on the shoulder. And I looked around, and it was a broomstick. I pulled it around, and we all grabbed a hold of it.
And now that's all they have to hold them together. And David Lytle prays that the beacon strapped to his chest is transmitting.
I knew, if anything, they was coming to find us. The only thing that was in my mind was how long.
They are battered by the waves and the seawater in their mouths and the deafening storm in their ears.
It's like you hear it coming up from behind you. It sounded like a freight train.
This is water now we're talking about.
Yes, water. As the wave would come over the top, and then it'd smash down on you. It'd feel like a 20-pound sledgehammer hitting you, and it'd drive you down, you know, 5, 10 foot, if not more.
Seemed like forever to get back to the air. The first thing we'd do is ask is if everybody was still there.
1 hour passes, 2, 3, 4. By now they have traveled 25 miles, and even in 80-degree water, hypothermia menaces. The men are losing body heat and strength, and still they cling to their broomstick and wait.
We were flying almost sideways getting out there.
Meanwhile, helicopter pilot Joe D'Angelo sees something in the driving rain. David Lytle looks up and sees something too.
I said, I think I just saw a helicopter.
To be honest with you, never saw a helicopter. Saw a couple angels coming.
From the air, they are like pinpricks in the angry water, till they fire a flare, and the Navy men get a surprise.
We fully expected to be 8 guys in a raft when we got there.
Roger, pilot out down.
Rescue swimmer Shad Hernandez is lowered 75 feet into the vicious waves.
As soon as I got in the water, I just disconnected and I tried to work my butt off to get over to him.
At that point, are you tethered to anything?
No.
The challenge for the pilot to hold the position and for the crew to hoist rescuer and survivor up to the Seahawk. Well, the storm sends them swinging like a wild pendulum.
When I went up with the last survivor, well, wave brought us up, and then it dropped out from underneath us, and we just started swinging.
So we just, you know, took a deep breath, said, all right, ready, do it again, and then we went, everything went okay.
Amazingly, the entire rescue takes less than 15 minutes. But where are the other 5? En route to the Kennedy, the survivors give the coordinates of the last known location and direction of the raft. The helicopters refuel. Pilot Chris Basile worries that daylight is running out.
What's the feeling? At least we got 3.
No, we got 3 and we wanted 8.
40 to 50-foot seas, wind blowing 60, 65. We're in rain squalls. We're taking a pretty bad pounding in the life raft. It was really bad.
Pilot Basile knows that rafts can stay lost in weather much better than this.
There were times flying through that rainstorm. If you ever been in like a car wash and your windshield is totally covered with water, that's what it was like.
And yet somehow, against all odds, in a momentary break in the squall, they spot it. But how do you hover over such a tiny moving target in such weather, getting low enough to perform the rescue and high enough to avoid the waves?
What I ended up having to do was I took the raft and I put it right outside my window, and I basically looked down and just held it there for about 35 minutes.
Visually?
Flying all these
Visually.
manually.
I felt like I was stirring a pot with the controls, trying to just keep it there and keep it steady.
By now, the hurricane is even worse. Rescue swimmer Tim Lemmerman, just 20 years old, drops into his very first rescue.
Going down, next thing you look over, you see this, 30, 40-foot wave coming at you like this is gonna hurt really bad. 1 minute you're in the water, next minute you're out of the water, and you're like a yo-yo.
At the end of this rope?
It's just because the water keeps dropping out from underneath you.
Again and again, the rescuers drop through the storm, and one by one lift the sailors away. These are the actual photographs of the rescue.
It was terrible conditions, and they made it look easy.
On board the JFK, a crewman taped the scene as everyone, all 8 of them, returned, battered, exhausted, and alive.
If the JFK had not been out there riding out the storm, what would have happened?
There was no other assets in the area to get these people out.
They'd be dead.
They'd be dead.
That evening, right there on the JFK, the admiral of the fleet had a party, and 8 men who work on the sea had never felt so important before.
And then that night they said a ship's prayer, and they thanked God for us and saving us. It was unbelievable.
What caused the boat to start taking on water isn't clear. The Coast Guard is still investigating.
This is Dateline Tuesday for September 28th, with reports tonight from